My guest today is Professor Madeleine Beekman, who's a professor of evolutionary biology and behavioral ecology at the University of Sydney, Australia. The latest book is Origin of Language, How We Learn, Speak, and Why. Welcome back, Madeleine.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. So, has the book been published or at the threshold of being?
Yeah, it's confusing. So it's been published in Australia and New Zealand. It will come out at your end tomorrow. For me, it's already August 5th, but for you, it's still August 4th. It comes out in the US and Canada on August 5th. And then in the UK, it comes out on August 15. So it's very confusing. So I don't even know which day to celebrate. So I think I'll just wait until the 15th of August.
Yeah, I'm a big New Zealand fan. So as long as the book is in New Zealand, I think they're good. And let's see a little bit about sort of the book. So I skimmed through it, Brian. I know that you had a big internet outage. I don't know if this was going to happen. But the book is not just about language. It touches on all sorts of things, society, peace, artificial intelligence. So I want to talk about all of that. I'm interested in almost any topic you want to talk about. But can you set some of the general context what the book is about?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is I've never been interested in human evolution. I'm an experimental evolutionary biologist, and for that reason, I want to do experiments. So I always worked on insects, in particular honeybees and ants, and also albeit slime mold, but that's a completely different story. But at some stage, I decided that I wanted to try something totally different. I wanted to write a book. And initially that was going to be an academic book, but then I was asked to apply for a fellowship at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Berlin a few years ago. And I thought, well, that will be a great opportunity to really try and do something totally different. And I then also realized that when you write academic papers, if you're lucky, you have about 5 people who are interested in that particular topic. Excuse me. So I thought, well, I want to write something totally different. I want to write a book for a general audience. But at the same time, sort of ever since the genomic revolution, I was a bit confused about how evolution actually works. Because being a behavioral ecologist, working on insects, I always try to understand why animals behave in a particular way. So how is their behavior selected by natural selection? And how that then acts on genes, on genomes, that was totally unclear to me. And especially since the Human Genome Project came out and we realized that we don't actually have that more genes than people expected, because they thought, we're such a complex species. There will be a huge number of genes that can explain what it means to be human. Well, of course, that never materialized. So then I thought, okay, if I force myself to write a book on how evolution works, then I will have to sort of marry those two levels. So the level of the genes in the genome and the level of the individual. But then, of course, I realized that someone else had already wrote a book, How Evolution Works, and it's Ernst Mayr. And he's a much more famous evolutionary biologist than I will ever be. But at the same time, I thought evolution is such a huge topic. I have to somehow narrow it down and have a clear framework. And then I thought, well, if I want the general audience to pick up my book, then it has to be about something that they care about. Well, what do humans care about? Humans care about humans. So I thought, okay, I'm going to frame it.
Some humans care about humans.
Exactly. So I thought, so why don't I frame it around human evolution, even though I've never had any interest in human evolution? So I started reading and reading and reading. By then I was in Germany, where I had just the best time ever, because there was no admin, there was no teaching, there was nothing. I just could read and think. And that's when I found all these weird accidents in our genomes that basically, ultimately, in our species, led to a ballooning brain.
Yeah.
Ballooning brain had to be accommodated by our skull. So our head changed, and that led to the ballooning brain basically led to two things. It led to babies having to be born very prematurely for two reasons. The brain is extremely expensive metabolically.
Yeah.
So pregnancy cannot be longer than it is because the pregnant mother basically cannot garner enough resources to look after her own metabolism and grow an even bigger brain in utero. But also, if the head gets too big, the baby gets stuck in a birth canal. Birth is extremely difficult in humans anyway, so we're at the upper limit. The reason being that our pelvis became narrow because we walk on two legs. So the trade-off was you can either grow a big brain, but then a baby needs to be born really early. Being born really early with a very undeveloped brain gives you enormous neuroplasticity. So that means that our babies, I call them sponges of information. So they basically absorb information. They learn really quickly. The brain makes all these new connections. And at the same time, because these babies are so premature, they need a lot of care. They need so much care over about 15 years. It takes about 15 years in a hunter-gatherer family for a child to gather enough resources, the resources that she herself needs. So for 15 years, she relies on other people. That is an enormous amount of energy that needs to be put into that child. And we can our species could get away with it by asking for help, because that large brain also increased, if you want to call it, intelligence. And because of the morphological changes that accommodated the the morphological changes that were needed to accommodate a large brain gave us the ability to speak because of the descent of the larynx. The tongue sits half in our throat, and we have exquisite control over the muscles of our tongue and our lips and our breathing. And that all together allows us to speak.
So let me ask you this, Madeleine. So I don't know much about this. It seems like the nature took a big risk here, which is the child is going to be born essentially incompetent, but with the potential, hardware potential that will replace this. But then it requires not nurturing. It requires a tremendous amount of nurturing, from the family, from a larger society. Nature took a huge amount of risk here in this design, it seems to me. So I'm glad it worked out, but I would not have bet on it working out, actually. It seems to be solved in some ways.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, so it seems like nature took a big risk in the design, in the sense that the baby comes out essentially incompetent, I would say, and it requires her parents, her family, her society to take care of her, to bring her to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a design that existed prior to Homo sapiens. And so it seems like it's a huge risk from an evolutionary perspective that nature seemed to have gone into. But I'm glad it did it because we are here now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you use the word risk, because what I realized when I was going through basically our human evolution, going back since the split with our last common ancestor with chimpanzees and bonobos, which is 6 to 7 million years, every time something completely strange happened. So one of the first things that happened that set off the split between the lineage leading to chimpanzees and the lineage ultimately leading to us is that two chromosomes got stuck. So chimpanzees and gorillas have 24 sets of chromosomes. Bears, we have 23 because 2 chromosomes stuck together and stay together ever since. So that was probably the first split. Now you can say, well, that's a completely weird thing, and our species or incipient species should have gone extinct at that stage. So that's also, you call it a risk. You can call it a risk that, it just happened. But no, for some reason that worked. So off we went in our own merry ways. Then other strange things happened, like the inversion of a chromosome. So a part of a chromosome broke off. It was glued back together, but upside down. So now you have an inversion on one chromosome. And that leads to what geneticists call a gene nursery, because you have no recombination anymore, because the complementary chromosome still has the normal sequence, say. So that stops recombination, which apparently allows lots of playing around, if you wish. So, we change this gene. What is the effect if we change this gene? Oh, it doesn't work. So that goes extinct. But this one actually works. So all species actually have a large number of gene nurseries on particular parts of chromosomes. And we just happen to have a few genes on that, within that nursery, that are human-specific genes. As I said, because there was no recombination, they were maintained and they were selected for, because either they were selected for or they weren't selected against. Now, our ancestors probably have been social for about 4.4 million years. The reason being, about 4.4 million years, Australopithecus afarensis, better known as Lucy, came down from the trees for one reason or another. You can also say, well, there was a huge risk because, it was safe living up on the trees. So why did Lucy and her other companions decide to come down from the trees? Well, they did. And yes, it was a risk. And it was particularly risky because this happened in Africa. Africa is still the land of the huge predators. 4.4 million years ago, there were even more big predators, and the predators were probably much bigger too. So now you have a two-legged species that can't run fast, because if you run on 2 legs, you can never run as fast as anything on 4 legs.
Yeah.
You can't climb up in trees anymore because they lost that ability, because you can't be really good at walking on 2 legs and climbing up in trees at the same time. So it's a trade.
Well, ton of bad decisions.
Yeah, but if they hadn't made that decision, we wouldn't be talking to each other now over the internet. So you better be glad that they made that decision all that time ago.
Yes.
Anyway, so the best strategy then was to stick together, because, more eyes is safer. But the other thing was, so now you walk on 2 legs. You still get babies, because otherwise, again, we wouldn't be here. But what do you do with those babies? Now you can't put them on your back because they will fall off. Also because Lucy probably lost most of her hair. They didn't have the chimpanzee kind of hair anymore. But even if they would have had the chimpanzee kind of hair.
You guys have in Australia something, I can't quite know the name, but it has something with the baby.
Yes, but I don't think Lucy had invented that yet. But yes, a carrier or whatever you call it.
Yes.
Yes, I had my daughters in the carrier things, but Lucy didn't have it yet. So what did they need to do? They had to carry the baby. Now, so you walk on 2 legs, your hands are forward babies. So babies literally became a handful. So that also makes you even more vulnerable. But it also means while you're carrying babies, you can't do anything else with your hands. So there was a big pressure to become social. So by the time our brain started to balloon in our species, we already had 4.4 million years of living in a social environment with all its intricate social interactions, not through language, but through body language, through gestures, through other vocalizations, which are not as precise as language. So everything, you must say that natural selection prepared us for 4.4 million years for this amazing ability.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Madeleine. So I want to get into language. And so we've been sort of building up to it for millions of years. You say body language. And body language is sort of universal. I think a lot of our other ancestors, chimpanzees and others, also, I would imagine, had significant body language, right? So it's a language that ultimately sort of broke Homo sapiens away from the rest.
Yes. So I'm just reminded the other day I was talking to someone on the radio and I couldn't see them, but I was still using my hands. So I was still using a lot of body language as I'm doing now. You know, there's this joke. How do you keep someone quiet by tying their hands behind their backs and they can't speak, especially if you're from Italy or whatever. You know, we always have this stereotype that Italians have to move their hands a lot, but all humans do. So we still use a lot of body language. And as you say, chimpanzees, that's all they have because they can't speak, because they do make sounds, but they don't have the morphology and they don't have the brain power to evolve something like we do. It's just this weird fluke that our brain started to grow that gave us the brain power. And at the same time, the morphology to use that brain power to evolve such a sophisticated communication system as language.
So I like to listen to get commentary, audio commentary. I would rather listen to audio than video. And maybe there's a historical. I mean, I grew up in South India, in the US, and we only had radio. And radio was my life, you know. So I grew up with audio. So growing up with audio is actually kind of a distinctly different evolutionary invention in some ways, because it's supposed to grow up with no TV, which I grew up with no TV. That person is going to be quite different from somebody, you know, turned on the video games, the TV at age 3, right? So it's sort of a similar concept in the sense that, well, let me ask you this. So what brought language into the Homo sapien system? I mean, what happened?
Well, what happened is the need for precise communication comes from two ends. So the babies, because they're so dependent, need to ensure that there's someone that looks after them. Yeah. So, and if you now see, you know, how natural selection works, so you have a characteristic that gives you just a little bit higher probability than the others in your same population to grow up and reproduce successfully. So any baby that managed to make the right sounds to attract more attention to itself, which then translate into more resources, would have an evolutionary advantage. At the same time,
that's a selection process.
It's a selection on more precise communication. And contrary to other theories about why we speak, the main ones are hunting, increased ability to hunt successfully, that I do not see how that could translate really quickly into an increased reproductive success. Whereas if you see communication as a way to raise the next generation more successfully or more quickly, then that of course has a direct reproductive effect. So that's according to, well, that's what I think, that has been the driving force behind the more precise communication. And of course, with every generation, or not even generation, because we are such good learners, the ability to communicate precisely became better and better and better. So it really, really quickly changed our whole species, because if we wouldn't be speaking, then we would have been a completely different species. We would be much more similar to chimpanzees again. The other interesting thing is, ever since we were able to speak, or at least have the ability to communicate more precisely, the interbirth intervals became smaller. Now, you would think that that is totally bizarre, because what you do as a species, you produce extremely dependent young. So you would think that you produce fewer of them and that the interbirth interval would be extended. But our species did the total opposite, started to produce more of them. Why? Because we lived in this social environment, had this this ability to communicate precisely, to ask for help, to have your kin assist with the raising of your offspring so you could produce more of them. So reproductive success goes up and you could outcompete non-speaking relatives or other species.
Yeah, so I don't know much about this background, so I'm just sort of advancing my hypothesis. You can change it. So the baby, it looks like a bundle of firmware. It's like she knows how to smile, how to cry, how to make people care for her. That's the firmware. When it comes with the baby. And then if she survives, maybe a year or two down the road, she picks up stuff that would be quite useful. But there is a sort of an initial condition issue, right? So the initial condition, and there's a selection effect there too. A baby born who doesn't know how to smile and cry would be in bad shape.
Yes. So there's this wonderful quote, also a bit macabre, which I think is in one of Sarah Bluffer Hurdy's books, either Mothers and Others or Mother Nature. I can't remember which one. So she quotes an Eskimo, an Inuit father, who says that a daughter was born and clearly they didn't want to have another child, and he was about to leave her in the snow or whatever. But then he looked at her and she was so adorable that he couldn't do it. So, I mean, that's why all young animals look totally adorable. Yeah. Because they have to, because their life literally depends on someone looking at them and thinking, oh, you're adorable, I'm going to take you home and look after you. So I used to teach evolutionary biology at the University of Sydney, and I used to teach in a course called animal behavior. And because one of the things that I always wanted to stress students is that we are also an animal. We call ourselves human, but we're still just another animal. So lots of our behavior you can understand from looking at, how other animals behave. And one example I use is the smell of babies. The smell of babies, people have done experiments, is almost irresistible to young girls.
Oh, wow.
Boys, not so much, but young girls it is. And they're just, these babies manipulate other individuals to look after them. I have a granddaughter now, and she's 4.5 months old. And of course, she's the most adorable thing ever because she has to be. So, yes, I mean, if you're an unlucky child and for some reason you do not elicit this response in adults, then you're off to a very bad start.
Let's talk about the biology of language. So I remember you saying in the book that, there's a physiological change.
Yes.
And Homo sapiens have gone through before we could talk, probably. So talk a little bit about that.
So let me, because I haven't mentioned this yet, the reason why our brain started to balloon is because there was a pseudogene. It's still a pseudogene in chimpanzees and gorillas. So a pseudogene is a gene that used to code for protein, but no longer. But the sequence is still in the genome, it just doesn't do anything. In our lineage, for some strange reason, it got repaired. Not only did it get repaired, it also made copies of itself. So in humans with a normal brain size, we all have 3 copies of that particular gene. Now that gene influences the speed with which glial cells, which are basically stem cells in the brain, stem cells in the brain, differentiate. So either these stem cells have to make, like all stem cells, have to make a decision, if you wish. Either I'm going to copy myself, so I'm just going to make another glial cell, or I'm going to start differentiating into a neuron. That is a one-way street. So once they differentiated into a neuron, they become a neuron. So the more of those glial cells you have, the more neurons you have in the end. So this duplication, or this copying of this repaired gene, affects the number of glial cells, in a sense that the number of glial cells increases. And we know this because people who have only 2 copies have a below average size brain, which is actually a disease, a microcephaly. If they have more copies, they have macrocephaly. So the brain is so large that it doesn't fit in the skull. So if you have 3 copies, you get this human brain, which then as I said, it needs to fit in the skull. So if you look at someone who has no hair, you will see that the back of the head is a really strange structure. It sticks out. It's very bulbous, and that's unique amongst all Homo species and all Australopithecus and all our other ancestors. So our head, Homo sapiens head, is unique. No other human ever had it. Now, so these changes in the skull pushed our larynx down into the throat, took with it the tongue. And I guess part of the neuroplasticity then also allows us to control our breathing. So when we awake, we use a different neural network to control our breathing, because I would not be able to speak without being able to control the puffs of air that come through over the vocal cords, over the larynx.
Is it an energy optimization issue or something different?
No, I don't think it's an energy optimization problem. It's to control the sounds that we make. So if you inhale helium, helium has a lower density, I think, as oxygen, and then you get this very strange voice, because you now have a different gas that goes over the vocal cord. So then you can see how you can experiment how the control of a gas over the vocal cords affects the way you speak. So singers, opera singers, or any singer really, but particularly opera singers, I think, they can make the most exquisite sounds because they have even better control over how they breathe. But the interesting thing is, when you're asleep, your breathing is taken over by another part of your brain. So this ability to use our muscles of the tongue and the lip and our breathing is also wired somewhere in our brain.
Or suspended because you might be dreaming. So,
Yes, all these things go together. You have the morphological change, you have the ability in the brain to do something with the ability that is now there, and then you have the evolutionary driving force, which is these really dependent children. So all these things then work together. You get a positive feedback loop. If you're just a little bit better at language or communication, then your reproductive success goes up, etc., etc. So it's just runaway selection at some stage. And here we are, speaking over the internet, as I said earlier.
Yes, I remember you, again, sort of skimming the book, I remember you saying, so people with multiple languages have more developed some parts of the brain. I'm the poster child for this. I grew up in South India without talking English for 18 years. I started talking English in the US. I've been here for 30 years now. It is, I mean, in Europe, I mean, this is very common. Actually, in Europe, you find people speak 5 different languages very easily. Um, so, so going back to the language question, is there some sort of specialization in the brain that helps in the language? Is there an evolutionary thing? Is there something that we could potentially encourage? So should we let more kids in the first grade learn at least 3 languages just for the future benefits?
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. So English is not my first language either, and I'm originally from Europe. So I think there's a lot of evidence now, because we're getting we humans live longer now.
Yeah.
And healthy aging, of course, is a hot topic, especially with all the, people of our generation who are getting on in age. And what you almost always read is if you want to stave off dementia or Alzheimer's, you have to keep your brain active. Well, you have to exercise, get the blood flow.
That's very clear. Yeah.
But also keep your mind sharp by always learning something new. And the example they often give is learning another language. But you're completely right that children, they just pick up a language, no problems whatsoever. Does it mean that there's a special part in the brain that sort of codes for language? People have been looking at the language, the language part of the brain for years. And there are a few areas that are definitely associated with language, but I don't think there is a language part of the brain. And we know this because people have damage, either a stroke or another injury.
They could recover. Yeah.
Yeah, but so the kind of damage to their linguistic ability depends on where the damage happened in the brain. And I think in some instances, you can relearn to speak. In other instances, you can't. So that, they're definitely parts of the brain that are essential to language, but I don't think there is the language part of the brain that's one component.
Let me ask you about accents, Madeleine. So, accents. I remember reading something 20 years ago that said, if you learn a new language after, say, 14 years or something, I don't know what I mean. You will never shake the accent. You'll never get the accent because your brain is basically doing the first language first, and then you have to translate it. So there's a few microseconds delay in the translation, and that shows up in accents. So I would ask you a larger question. So clients out of Africa and from the safety clients, they could all have that accents. I mean, they came from different parts of Africa, and they try to communicate. I mean, let's say the language started maybe 100,000 years ago. I don't know that time frame. You should know. They all have different accents. Right? I mean, so how did we all get here in some way?
Well, so people have done an interesting study where they looked at phonemes. So phonemes are the smallest sounds you can make. So the K or the th, they're phoneme.
Yeah.
And they compared all the languages in the world and linked the number of phonemes that a particular language has with the basically migration of those particular people. The idea being it's almost like the founder effect in genetics. So, you have a large population, then a subset of individuals from that population move to another place, and they take with them a subset of all the genes from the population they came from. So then their genes, gene diversity is much smaller than from the original population, and then they spread again. So the idea with the phonemes is the same. So we started speaking in Africa. So African languages have the largest number of phonemes. The Oceania was the last part to be colonized by humans, and many of those languages have the smallest number of phonemes. But at the same time, of course, the longer people live in a particular place and speak a language, then you can say it's almost mutations. Then you get an increase in diversity again. So using that, the analogy between mutations, founder effects, etc., they came to the conclusion that language probably originated about 150,000 years ago, which coincides with Homo sapiens leaving Africa. So language evolved once. So we all come sort of from, one single language, and then with the spread across the continents and countries, language diverged. I mean, Darwin looked at language as an evolutionary tree. And of course, that's also how linguists study the origin of languages, because you can.
This is so interesting, Madeleine. I ask you something. Sorry to interrupt. So, when Homo sapiens came out of Africa, they had to interact with the Neanderthals in Europe and the Denisovans in Asia. Was language an invention that forced those interactions in some ways? Do we have any data?
We don't know. And it's a great shame that we don't know. So we do know that we mated with them, because you can
we
find.
definitely mated with them, because I did my DNA test. I have 4.5% Neanderthals and 2% Denisovans. And I'm fundamentally Homo sapien. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so a question that I have, because with the Neanderthals, we know that we do not, in Homo sapiens, there's no mitochondrial DNA that comes from Neanderthals. So all the DNA and mitochondria are only transmitted via the mother.
Yeah.
So we only have nuclear DNA that comes from Neanderthals. And then only, of course, if you're not from African origin, because
So that means
Neanderthal.
only fathers. So we got the guy.
Well, that's what I think. And if you look at any, depictions of Neanderthals, they look much bigger and probably stronger. So it wouldn't surprise me if the mating was not consensual at all, and it was basically Homo sapiens females being raped by Neanderthal males. That's what I think.
Possibly. Yes.
Exactly, possibly. I know. But I don't think I think there's good evidence that Neanderthals, we don't know anything about Denisovans because we don't have a whole skeleton.
We have no data.
No, we only have DNA from a pinky and from a molar.
Yeah, that pinky is not even Denisovan,
Isn't it?
It's a different species.
It's a different species again. Well,
That's
isn't that interesting? We keep finding more species. So just go back, just in your head, about 150,000 years ago, even shorter. And there were all these other species of humans walking the planet. And now life is boring because there's only one. Anyway, I think the reason why we are the only one is because we are the only one that invented language.
Language is our technology. Language is our large language models, LLMs. What a little bit about that? You have some opinions on artificial intelligence. So do I.
Yes.
So language was our sort of spatial technology. As soon as we could communicate in some systematic way that takes structure, semantics, grammar, that words can do, mice cannot do, but they might be communicating, but we haven't quite understood them. But we could actually communicate in a very complex way, right? So that was a technology that was.
Yes, you're right. I mean, all social animals, all social organisms have some form of communication. But what is special about human language is that it's symbolic. So words mean something, and you can put the words together in a different way, and then your sentence means a different thing. So the same word can be used in different contexts to mean different things. That's why
Yeah,
context
English is horrible.
matters.
Madeline, English is so horrible from a systematic syntax perspective. I mean, we say all sorts of things that most non-English speakers say, what is this guy doing? I mean, he's saying the same words, but it means different things. It's so crazy.
Especially, yeah, and if you speak a tonal language like
Yeah,
Thai or Mandarin, then it's not just where the word is, but it's
right.
also how you pronounce the word that gives it a total different meaning. That's why tonal languages are, for people like you and I, almost impossible to learn. Um, but this symbolic language and this syntax, the grammatical rules allow us to talk about everything. We can talk about ideas, we can talk about things that don't exist, we can talk about the future, we can talk about the past. That is totally unique.
That is
And
unique.
and I think that there's good evidence that we, Homo sapiens, are the only species that has this ability, that Neanderthals, of course, Neanderthals and Denisovans could communicate, because as I said earlier, communication is essential for all social organisms, but their morphology was just not right. So their necks were too short and the shape of their head was totally different. And then a fairly recent study looked at epigenetic marks, comparing the epigenome of Neanderthals and with the epigenome of chimpanzees and humans. And they found that I think there were 53 genes differentially expressed in humans, only expressed in humans, which are not expressed in chimpanzees and Neanderthals. And most of them have something to do with the throat. So that's other indirect evidence that they probably did not have the ability to speak that we do. And that was probably their demise. So we had language, we could increase our reproductive output, we could communicate much better, and basically in that respect just out-competed, out-reproduced the Neanderthals and Denisovans, even though they were probably stronger and bigger.
So we get Foxby too.
Uh,
But a little bit about this. Sydney didn't have internet last night. Without internet, we are all dead. That's right. So FOXP2. So this is a gene that maybe 10 years ago people attributed to language. But now we have better information, right?
Yeah, so FOXP2, very interesting gene. So I think in the 1980s, I think 86, not quite sure, there was this family in the UK that seemed to have a strange aberration in the sense that the people seemed to be of normal intelligence, but they couldn't speak properly. So they were sent, some of the
But they can
children,
speak, but they will say things that is gibberish. You said that.
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they couldn't have, they couldn't pronounce things properly.
So they had the hardware to speak, to make noises, but the noises wasn't speech, so to speak.
Exactly. So it had something to do with the brain structure. Because the other thing that they couldn't do, apparently, is they could not come up with a past tense of imagined verbs. So apparently, they haven't tried it. But once a child has learned the grammatic rules of the language she's learning, she can come up with the past tense of an invented verb, so a non-existing verb, because she just learned the rules. And apparently these people couldn't do that either. So they could not grasp the syntax of
Yeah.
English because this is in England. So because it was all in a family, they were sent to a genetic clinic and then they found that they all had this genetic aberration. So it's part of a chromosome that was different from other individuals, because I think there was one one family member who did have normal speech, and they did not have that same bunch of mutations. Then later, they've honed it down and found that there was a specific mutation of FOXP2. So that then became the language gene.
Language gene. Yeah.
The language gene. And then other people found evidence, they said, of positive selection in our lineage on FOXP2. So that, the claims are stronger still. Positive selection in Homo sapiens on FOXP2, which means that it's being driven by the adaptive value of precise communication. And people redid that study with a larger sample size, found no evidence of positive selection. And then they also found FOXP2 in Neanderthals, the same,
wow.
the same
So
version, I
that
think.
sort of kills that hypothesis, yeah.
No, but the other thing is, so FOXP2 is definitely important in vocalization because almost all mammals well, I would be careful, but anyway, many other mammals also have FOXP2, and they've done those experiments in mice. So baby mice with normal FOXP2, they produce a very high pitched sound that attracts the mother. If you knock out their version of FOXP2, they don't make that sound anymore. So FOXP2 is just important for vocalization, but it's not the language gene.
So it's important to vocalization. So it's a hardware gene in the sense that
Yes.
you don't have it, you cannot vocalize. You don't have it, you may not have language. But it doesn't really drive language. So that's the part I think we missed, right, in summary.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, if you don't have FOXP2, then you have issues with vocalization, but it's not that it's the driving force behind our ability to speak. I don't think there's a single gene for language.
Yeah, I mean, language is so complex. I mean, I can't even begin to think about it. But language got us far. I mean, language is the only thing, 100,000 years, Homo sapiens, right? I mean, we could socialize, we could communicate, we could organize, we could coexist. That is, language is a technology that is unparalleled in any way before, right? In some ways.
Language is uniquely human, and it made us what we are today. And of course, it has totally sped up our cultural evolution. Because if you think about it, 150,000, so our species is about 300,000 years old. And then language probably originated about 150,000 years ago, which coincides with our species leaving Africa. I mean, 150,000 years in evolutionary time is nothing.
Nothing.
So
It's a trickle.
it's totally nothing. So the fact that we moved from caveman to, making plans to colonize Mars in 150,000 years is all due to language driving then cultural evolution, because with language, you can transmit knowledge much more quickly. You can build on knowledge, especially with the invention of writing, which was about 5,000 years old.
Yeah.
That just, changed everything and allowed us to dominate the earth, outcompete all our competing Homo species. And what we do with it, so that's something that humanity doesn't realize, I think, that we have this amazing skill that gave us the ability to become what we are, but we also have a unique responsibility to look after the rest of the planet. And that seems to have gone missing a little bit, which is, of course, is scary. And that's why we're in, the current world situation isn't the best one, unfortunately. And language made us do it, but language is also the only way that can get us out of it again.
So to finish up with, I mean, you have some ideas around artificial intelligence, AI, as it's called. I've been in this area for like 30 years. I don't think there is any AI. I'll call it intelligent automation. I mean, we have been doing automation, right? With the computers, and it's been working very nicely. So artificial intelligence, as the young kids out of graduate schools start companies and make automations that are thinking and as a recent Nobel laureate said, are going to kill humanity off in 5 years. I think this is a false idea. I don't think there is anything that I can see that is artificially intelligent. But it,
I'm glad you say that. So years ago, we hosted, so I was part of Society of Fellows, which I run with a colleague of mine at Sydney Uni. So we had, these high achieving postdoctoral fellows that got prestigious fellowships, and we regularly got them together and had a speaker from somewhere. And one day we had a philosopher who's attached to that institute in the UK that's concerned about existential threats to humanity.
That's what you were too, right? When you did?
No, I wasn't there. No.
Oh, you were in a different institute.
I was at a different institute, exactly. I was in Berlin. But anyway, so he gave this talk in which he was basically saying what you just said. Artificial intelligence is going to destroy humanity, and we have to be very careful, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
We had all these young kids, postdocs,
Yes.
and many of them from computer science. And we all said, no, the danger with AI is what humans do with it. It's the humans who are the dangerous bit and not the AI. And I've been playing around with large language models because I thought it was fun. So, for example, I was writing something and I didn't quite like the paragraph. So I thought, okay, I'm now going to ask AI, can you make this better? It just got worse. Why? Because, and I was actually reading an essay by an Australian author, and she was saying what these language models do is they trawl the internet, they use all the stuff that we've put on the internet, they do it with or without our permission, because she's an author, and one of the parts of that article was pushing back against this. It's basically copyright infringement, because authors haven't given their consent to have their words used by AI to make the AI better, and someone else is making money from that better AI. So what it's basically doing is looking at words and sentence constructions that occur the most often, so therefore that must be the right thing. And she was saying, but if you're really creative, you come up with word sequences that are not your normal way of using the language. That's what creativity is. So I'm with you. It's doing something. It's copying what we've put on the internet. It's using what we put on the internet. Just makes normal, average, boring human speech, and there's nothing to see. And I don't understand why people are so scared about it.
So did you see some MIT study that showed just 3 weeks ago? That showed that your brain is like somebody doing chat GPT all the time. It's like your brain was on drugs. It has no activity. And so the active IQ has been going up over the past 100 years, I would say. And things have been going down the last 5 years. And it's going to go down, I would argue, speculate, it's going to go even further down as AI-based control of all the young kids' brains. I think this is an existential threat to humanity, not because of AI is going to go out there with machine guns and kill everybody, like the Nobel laureate says. It is because our IQ is going to be driven down to zero at some point. because of Chat GPT, or I don't want to pick Grok or whatever. I mean, not a single thing, but all the stuff, all this stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's going to dumb down humanity to some level that is going to be very problematic.
I agree. So the increase in IQ is called the Flynn effect after the New Zealander, I forgot his first name, but his last name is Flynn. So he described it for the first time. But I think since the 70s, IQs have been going up in Australia, New Zealand, the US, England. I think those are the countries that he looked at.
US too? I find it hard to believe.
No, it went up, but now it's gone down. But yes, it did go up in the US too. But you're right. In the last 5 years or so, the Flynn effect is actually negative.
Yes.
And no one gives an explanation, but I'm with you. I think your explanation is, well, that would be my explanation too. Because why would you remember anything? Why would you learn anything? Because you could just look it up.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
It's dumb.
Yeah, so there's no remembering history anymore. There's no need for it. You can just
Well, there is a need. We wouldn't have all these protests and conflicts, etc., if people would know a little bit more about history. But that's a different topic again.
Yeah, so let me ask you one last thing. So all the companies, the search company, the Facebook company, the electric vehicle company, they're not investing in a nuclear power plant because we need a lot more energy to do all this AI stuff. Newton, Maxwell, Einstein, those brains took only 20 watts. Just a salad would have done it. And so now we are into nuclear power plants because we're running out of electricity to create artificial intelligence. I think we are in such a long track. I mean, it's just a speculation or opinion that you're going to kill human creativity. And so this goes back to your book in some ways. For 10,000 years, we created language, we created societies, we created thinking, we created humanity. So now we got silicon mounts in all around the place that needs nuclear power plants to feed it. And this is, I believe this is how Homo sapiens are going to get out of the It's so crazy. I mean, I can't even, I'm sorry, I'm content here, but most like language too. So, I mean, we think about history, we think about literature, we think about arts. There's creativity there. So suppose I deploy AI and all those stuff, they'll be much more efficient. Yeah, they will be much more efficient. But humans are much more creative. And if you kill off humans, 8 billion of them appear, I think we'll have a different.
No, I agree. I mean, we're dumbing ourselves down. I mean, we now have, I'm not sure if you read about this AI influencer that no one actually knew that she wasn't real. I mean, that's how low we have sunk. Well, first off, influencers, I think, is, depressing that you have particular people who have so much influence by just being what they are, not because of what they do, but because of what they are. And some people are unwilling to spend money on people just because they're beautiful. Yeah. And now we have AI influencers that don't even exist. And why do we want to dumb ourselves down so much instead of read a good book or listen to some good music or go for a walk? Or, I don't know. In that respect, yeah, if you look at it that way, it's all a bit depressing, but I'm an optimist and I don't like being depressed. So I would like to
You're an
wish
optimist, Madeleine. I'm a
you
pessimist.
an optimistic
Yes.
tone.
Excellent. Yeah, this has been great, Madeleine. Yeah, thanks so much for coming back to me. So what's the title of your book again?
The Origin of Language, How and Why We Came to Speak, and it's been published by Simon and Schuster. And if you go to any Simon or Schuster website, or just type in my name and book, it will come up. And then everyone should buy it and read it, because it's much better than anything he can write.
As I said, I just skimmed it, but I learned so much from it on different topics. It's not just about language; it's about all sorts of things. So all sorts of interesting, excellent, Madeleine. So hopefully Sydney is back on the internet, and England is coming to Australia for the Ashes.
Ah, good. We can beat them.
Excellent. Yeah. Thanks again. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.